first of all, Mr. Kurtis, thanks for letting us do this.
Thanks for asking. A great idea.
I'd like to talk to you a little bit, first of all, about growing up in Kansas. What kind of values were imparted to you there that you think may have served you in good stead in your career?
Well, first of all, I was lucky enough to have two parents, which is very significant in this day and age. A stable house. My dad was in the Marines, so we traveled around the entire country. And that's important for one, a love of travel later on. You also had to make friends quickly and leave them quickly. The disadvantage is that you don't make deep roots, I guess, or lasting friendships, although I think I have. But it sort of creates someone who is made for this world. High mobility, assess in the industry a situation very fast. And so I think prior to moving to Kansas, that was important. Then we moved there, so I was able to go to high school, college, and law school in the state. Small town values, but the support system of a small town, is hard to find these days. One, you had two parents. Two, you had influential teachers on your life. You had a preacher. You had a football coach who, to me, kind of contained all of life's lessons in that game. One of the most important lessons that I learned was trying to make the squad, and I remember setting my mind to it and really concentrating and focusing on it, and tried again and again and again until finally I got a break and did well, made the team. And it sounds very simple, but life's success, final success, I think, is made up of small successes, which really builds your experience and confidence, and ultimately your personality. Then you go on, you graduate from college, law school, maybe oratory awards, moot court competition, little victories along the way, Marine Corps boot camp, until then you begin acquiring enough confidence, I think, to be a man or a person.
Just looking around, and this is something that's come to me from working in journalism, you have to be something of a generalist, interested in a lot of different things. How did you get such a wide appreciation for things in the world?
Well, maybe I learned early in the space race that I was not going to be an engineer. So I switched over, and frankly, this is maybe the most important creed I live by, and that is that I enjoy the process of communication. And I describe it as a circle. That circle involves observing facts, events happening, recording that, directing a cameraman and a crew, recording it, then bringing it back and preparing it, writing, editing, producing into a piece, then performing to communicate the facts, and ultimately then the presentation of it. All those are little steps, each one of which I get enjoyment out of. So if one goes down on me, I'll take enjoyment somewhere else. Now I have my own production company, and I really enjoy producing. So that, I think, has led me into a love of the process, not being on television. You might get an ego gratification for a day, at least I did, but that becomes a very boring part of the process. It's also, after you've done everything right, Ansel Adams described it as combining the outside with the inside to produce art. That means you observe an event, you combine it with your talent, your heart, your guts, and you produce a product that approximates what you have seen, but it has you in it. That has the greatest satisfaction for me, because it's kind of a giving of myself. I don't want to overstate it or be too dramatic, but it's a gift of information to people who can use it. And that's how I view everything I really do in this business. and I take it very seriously. I had a formative experience when I was just graduated from law school and I was studying for the bar. And a friend of mine, I'd worked my way through by working at the first television job I had. And a friend of mine asked me to fill in during vacation. And so I left my bar review class on campus of Washburn University School of Law in Topeka, Kansas, went out, and I was on the air when a tornado came through. And as it blasted through the town, I gave the alarm and reported then on it. And I think after 24 hours on the air, what I learned was that this business can carry a message of life or death. It can affect lives deeply. And for that reason, I've taken it very seriously after that lesson.
I was just thinking about that. I was going to ask you a little bit further down the line. I might jump ahead a little bit here.
Okay.
But that kind of appreciation is something I think that's extremely important to young people who are thinking about journalism as a career. It's a lot more than just getting a face on camera.
Well, it is. I mean, 99% is behind the scenes rather than just, not that you don't have to study and to master certain things. It is a bit of an acting job, but in our case, in my case, I learn a role, and that role is to try to be normal on camera. You have to get away the mic fright and the stage fright and eliminate the editorial nuances of facial expressions. And present yourself as a news person who is giving information without trying to color or slant it. I hope kids are serious and approach it seriously these days. You know, I think that this thing about being on television leaves pretty fast. It doesn't take long. You know, a couple of weeks or a couple of months of people saying, "Oh, I watched you on television last night." And then when you leave the house and realize that every person you see is going to say that, and you can't go anyplace without somebody says that, that's like eating all the chocolates in a box instead of just one.
Well, this sort of leads to the next question in a way. Today, television is the most powerful medium that we've ever really known, I suppose, and so much more potential. What's the role? What's the appropriate role for the broadcast journalist today?
It's never been more important because we have been guides to the community around us, what's happening. We have selected out those events around us that we deemed important, which we think you should know about. That's the definition of a guide to the information age, a guide to the internet. I mean, the editorial responsibility has never been more critical and responsible. The business isn't headed in a responsible way, and I'm sorry for that, but we are going to be more important than ever in the sense that people will need our services to judge an event, to determine whether or how much it will affect you, and how much you're going to be changed or interested or entertained by it, then giving you the either menu of news events and trying to get all the facts about it and deliver them to you without color is an important job.
You alluded to some challenges, I think, that are facing broadcast journalism. You said, well, we're not headed that way. Where are we headed, and what are the dangers, you say?
Well, we're headed toward making money. When I was getting into the business, it was a responsible service that I would equate with a profession. A minister has a service. A lawyer serves his clients. We served a community. Ironically, with only one station in town, we felt more of a responsibility than competitively with three. That has left. Non-broadcasters bought these entities, these stations, so they could make money off the time that we sell, off advertising, and we've lost track So to increase the ratings, they choose stories that are a little more sensational, a little more entertaining than what you should see, and hope that more people will watch so they can get more dollars. And in that process, and it pervades every part of this business, we've lost this feeling of service. And we're less of a profession than we were.
What should viewers demand?
Viewers should demand and should speak up, incidentally, because in many ways viewers vote, or at least 200 viewers with black boxes on their sets vote every night, every minute of the day. And we know what they are watching, and I don't believe the samples are accurate. But viewers should write in, viewers should call. You know, a lot of viewers will say, oh, I watch PBS, and then turn over a situation comedy, you know, on the networks. So we are left, stop and think about it, with the only conclusion to draw is that everybody wants the trash. They all watch the soap operas and the talk shows, and more of them watch the sleaze and the shocking things on talk shows than they do. It doesn't mean everybody has to watch the documentaries and with Neil Lehrer, but they must realize that their viewing habits vote. And the minute an owner gets the idea that they may want to see more documentaries, there'll be documentaries.
What's the most satisfying thing about your role?
Oh, I think feeling that we've helped somebody. It's the same thing as in a lot of professions. Just today I came from a lunch, and we showed a clip of a story that I did 20 years ago of a little girl that I helped onto a plane during the orphan lift in Vietnam. Her name was Phan Thi Mai Hoa, but it changed en route to Chicago, and when she landed at O'Hare, the David Harrises of South Bend received her, and she was suddenly Pamela Jean, all-American girl. She was full-blooded Vietnamese when she left. Now she is 20 years old, and she's very talented, got a big booming voice, has no conception of how she could ever have been Vietnamese, even though she looks Vietnamese. And she asked me today, well, I want to go back with you to Vietnam. So, I mean, that's really satisfying. I feel like a grandfather.
You've done some things that I think are very interesting. Coming from a PBS station, I appreciate what you're doing with New Explorers. You obviously see television as an educator.
I think it's the biggest educator we have. And if you stop and analyze the mass education that we're all getting from Sesame Street to the news, it will have changed more lives than anything else in the 20th century. But specifically, my mission is to lead the video revolution into the classroom, because I think that I was just in Bolivia, where we were premiering a New Explorers show, and we went to the Secretary of Education. He said, this would be wonderful. He said, the only problem is many of our schools don't have electricity, so we can't play, much less VCRs. And I said, well, that leaves the video out. And he said, oh, no. They're also illiterate, which brings the video in. I did a New Explorers from the University of Illinois called The New Science, the New Language of Science, which is pictures. You know, the supercomputer can now show us what a black hole looks like, where we don't have to read 12 pages of equations and approximate it. Those pictures really are worth 1,000 words, and that's what video is. And we're bringing those pictures, and soon we'll be able to flip through them on the internet or on your television or cable so quickly we'll communicate more information faster, and the same is true in the classroom.
We're having to think about not only the textual information that's in a piece, but the visual literacy aspects as well.
Yes, and for youngsters getting into the business, all they have to know is really one thing, a phrase called right to picture. And it's the simplest little thing, but the hardest to put into practice. Don't conflict with the picture that you are seeing. Act as a guide, as if you're off camera helping the viewer know what this is. You know, you're now looking at a hand, and I have 2, 3, 5 fingers. If you'll direct your attention to the middle of the hand, you'll see lines. You don't say, this is a hand, and repeat the obvious or conflict with it.
It's one of the toughest tricks to doing this.
Really is.
What is the philosophy behind the New Explorers? It works at several levels, obviously.
Yes. The philosophy is to follow a working scientist into the field. Second level is that it's a scientific education adventure. Third level, and more specifically, is that it's the scientific process at work. The scientist observes, he hypothesizes, and says, I'll bet it works this way. But in order to find out, I've got to go into the field and develop an experiment to gather data to prove it. And then we conclude. Now, fourth level, it's a beginning, a middle, and an end. It's a plot. It's an adventure. It's a story. And therein is my philosophy of teaching. From the story, in which we have our hero as a scientist going from A, B, C, in logical delivery, we have a context of reality, science working ahead of us. And in that context, we can learn. You can fasten in all those phrases and words you were forced to memorize, but forgot the minute you walk out the door. But when you see the scientist actually using the laser scalpel, you'll remember it.
You've also incorporated this into a curriculum experience for students here, starting in Chicago.
We have 60,000 students using New Explorers, 600,000 around the country. And we get a little complex. You know, we feel that you have to create the materials with teachers, hands-on experiments. Then you have to teach the teachers how to use it. And then you put it in the classroom and you have the videotape. And then the teacher follows in with her, so you're really, with the guides, and you're really getting them both ways. And then our third and magical step is a field trip of their own, in which they take what they have learned and they go out to a local partner. In Chicago, we're lucky we have Field Museum and Adler Planetarium and aquariums, but every town has a police department. That's also one of our partners. The science of criminology, how to solve a crime. Science is all around us. And if we just think, you can go to the local utility, learn how electricity is created and how it is sent then to create the power that does everything around us. A simple car is a semester of science classes. So it just takes engaging the mind of these kids. Now, we work a lot in the inner city. And first of all, you got to fight your way in. Then you have to quiet everybody down. I make a guarantee to the teachers that I guarantee you 30 minutes of absolute silence. And after that silence, you will have a story from which you can teach. Well, it works. And the teachers are absolutely crazy for it. And my only worry is that we can't manufacture these fast enough to give to them. They sign up for one person is up to 14 seminars using different tapes. And the beauty of pictures or television is that there are far more messages in there than just science. The Hispanic teachers are using it for Spanish classes. This is the culture of the Mayans. History. It's the notion, it's the principle of storytelling as teaching.
What appeals to you about working in a long form?
It's writing a book or a magazine article compared with a newspaper article. It is just a better way to tell a story. And you get to cover everything, all those things you have to leave out of that 2-minute piece on local television news. And I just get a satisfaction. You can develop mood, emotion. make people feel what's going on, in addition to just adding information.
I like the one that you just did on Tim McVeigh.
Oh, good.
A little bit more into what might make him tick and people around him.
Yes. Of course, now, we had a producer from the BBC and a correspondent also that was working with us. We commissioned it. And they don't have the sensitivities we do to fair trial, free press. So they can go ahead and essentially say, we won't say it, but he's the guy, you know, and just by asking the question, who is Timothy McVeigh? But it shows that we can do a quick turnaround and learn an awful lot about this guy, where he grew up, what he read, what he said, who his friends were, what organizations he belonged to, what was his expertise concerning bombs or fertilizers. And out of that single story, I realized that there's this undercurrent in America, a dissatisfaction with government and government bureaucracy and regulations. We didn't see it ahead of time, and probably we wouldn't have, although we were all set to do militias, believe it or not, before the Oklahoma City bombing.
Did you pick up anything in that story about how the popular media may have contributed to the problems that these people are feeling?
We didn't go into it at length there, but there is, of course, talk radio, which is dominated now by radical conservative talk show hosts. We'll be dealing with it more in July when we do a 4-part series on the media. But you have Rush Limbaugh and G. Gordon Liddy, who have a big following. Limbaugh with 20 million radio listeners, who has taken a vast wasteland that was almost ready to be put out to pasture and filled it with this unusual thing, this unusual talk. And he'll continue to dominate until there is a liberal talk show host that is as good and as interesting.
Could we address that camera?
Sorry?
Just started to wander there a little bit.
During that last question.
If I could follow up on that, as a, if you will, a more traditional broadcaster, someone who's you grew up under the fairness doctrine, and I would suspect as a lawyer, your rules of evidence. How do you feel about people like that who are obviously pitchmen for an idea or otherwise?
I can't do it. They're entertainers more than news people or journalists. I hope they're not holding themselves out to be journalists. They're entertainers, and they want, again, viewers equals money, equals advertising. I draw the line at evidence. I mean, these people will purvey half-truths and use them to then very authoritatively sound like they actually know something. He picked up on a Dixie Lee Ray book about ozone, in which she was trying to say that the scientific community doesn't really have the evidence, and thrashed the poor ozone issue until you would have thought that the whole government was engaged, and the scientific community, in a conspiracy to somehow pull the wool over our eyes. What motive there is, I don't know. And the problem is, 99% of the scientists who are investigating the ozone problem agree that there is a problem, and CFCs, man-made chemicals, are there at the bottom of it. Now, not to adequately represent it in the proportion. You know, it's the same criticism, I suppose, that's leveled at us when we show two people with a banner in front of a college hall, you know, and don't show the 30,000 that are going peacefully to class.
I'd like to sort of move toward wrapping up. As you think about your career, what sort of legacy would you like to leave when people sit down and consider the work of Bill Kurtis?
Well, I'm a straight man. I'm a straight reporter. I've always thought of myself not as an anchor man or anything other than a guy who's going to tell it down the middle. I've shaped my whole life and my personality and image, I think, like that. Not an advocate. Somebody who tried very hard to accurately portray the facts. Somebody's got to do it, as my hero Walter Cronkite says, and it might as well be us. I hope that I'm also remembered as a producer who was able to do the three things you have to do for long-form television. That's one, get financing, produce a product, and then distribute it. And it's difficult because documentaries don't make money. So it's a labor of love here. It's a mission, maybe to pursue the process that I love, this process of communication. I do feel that that I'm on a mission to contribute something to people's lives.
I'd like to ask you also, when you learned that you were being nominated to the Lincoln Academy, I guess I'm asking that question you don't want to ask. How did you feel?
Yeah,
but what was going through your mind when you're being in the same company, let's say, with Nobel laureates?
Yeah. I thought, how did I get on this list? Maybe they ought to go back and give me a recount. It is sobering to look around and see the contributions these people have made and consider your own as being rather unworthy of it. I'm very impressed. I think it's a wonderful award, especially for a state, to honor its citizens and hold these people up for some recognition that just says, you've done well among these citizens, and we thank you for it.
Dave, do you think there's anything I might have missed?
I don't want to.
Or what was the story that really put all of your skills and ethics on the line?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm always hoping it's the next story, because the thrill of knowing that you've got a big one will carry you for a long time. That's my high. But I think to review back on stories past, and incidentally, I have one of those stories right now that I can't tell you about for competitive reasons. But, you know, where you just kind of tingle when you think about it. But going back, I think it was Agent Orange in 1978, realizing that you have a story and told it well enough to start a snowball among veterans groups that would become really a catalyst for releasing the Pandora's box of veterans' problems. They were being blamed for the war and they didn't deserve it. So that has continued on. And in the process, I went back in 1980 to Vietnam and discovered Amerasian children who were being cast out of society. Came back, told the story, and here is the beauty of a journalist's job to communicate problems to intelligent people who can solve those problems. Congressmen saw it. They passed legislation which allowed these Amerasian children to come back over a number of other immigrants. And the result was several thousands actually of them. Oh, they all come here looking for their fathers, and that's not nice, but that was our responsibility.
It's that making a difference that
Yeah.
makes it worthwhile. While we're here, and I hope you don't mind my asking, but we do carry the New Explorers at our station. And
Yeah.
I was wondering if I might ask you to say, hello, I'm Bill Kurtis, producer of the New Explorers. I hope you watch it here on WSIU TV.
Sure. Shall I do it right in the camera?
Yeah.
Hello, I'm Bill Kurtis, host of the New Explorers, hoping you will join us for our next adventure. And again, the call letters?
WSIU.
Oh, sure, that's easy. Hello, I'm Bill Kurtis, host of the New Explorers, and I sure hope that you're with us on the next adventure here on WSIU. Join us here on WSIU for the next adventure of the New Explorers. Join us for our season premiere of the New Explorers here on WSIU. We'll take you to the Galapagos Islands and show you things you have never seen before.
One question about today. I think the audience might be a little confused about how is it that you can have two jobs, that you can be a documentary producer and an anchorman?
3 jobs, actually, A&E and
I've seen a lot of your work on it.
no good, Arson Entertainment, and then the local. Well, I've been here on WBBM most of my life in broadcasting, 30 years virtually for CBS. In that time, I left Chicago to become a correspondent out on the West Coast, covered the Charles Manson trial, among other things, and then went to New York to anchor the morning news in 1982, all the time coming back. And the reason that I wanted to come back from New York, one of the significant reasons, is that when you serve a local community, you see the people you're reporting about the next day. I mean, you're part of their lives, and there is a direct relationship. You're helping them understand what's going on in their lives. And there's a great satisfaction to that. As a network anchor, you're removed, you do your little job in a studio very early in the morning, and you don't know whether people are watching or not. And I felt an emptiness. I felt a lack of connection with viewers.